Misra.
Mr. Chairperson, I listened with great admiration my very distinguished colleague and friend, Shri Hardeep Puri, make a robust defense of why oil prices in India are going up in a very artful manner, as befits him. He's been a lifelong diplomat of a very, very distinguished career, and therefore he knows how to artfully weave in defense in some other area on an issue quite unrelated today. But I think he's answered some of the critics who've been shouting since the morning about the rise in fuel prices, and I commend him for his artfulness in having dealt with the matter. Mr. Chairperson, all shades of opinion in this House are always one and bipartisan when foreign policy issues are discussed in this House, and today has been no exception. I think even the most trenchant critics of the government are one with the government when dealing with foreign policy issues. There is no question that the non-alignment, which has been the bedrock of our foreign policy for the last 75 years plus, has stood us in good stead, has given us great respect worldwide, has managed to keep us afloat, has managed to keep us deftly clear of many conflict situations wherein otherwise there was a potential for us getting roped in. And I think, therefore, this is a policy that has held us in good stead, and I commend this government for having continued the same policy, even giving credit where it's due sometimes, as we heard the Prime Minister say off and on. The morning television visuals that one sees from Ukraine are heart-rending. There is no doubt about it. I think every heart cries at the kind of massacre that's taking place there. But then all war is about massacres. And therefore, I particularly wish to commend the government for the manner in which it has stood up to the near hectoring by the United States of our position that we've taken, of the nuanced position we've taken, to the point where lowly officials, of course, have virtually openly tried to threaten us. But even the President of the United States has gone to the extent of saying that India's position on the war has been shaky. And I think that's about as strong an indictment as can happen comes from the top quarters of America. But I mean, I find it a bit, frankly, shaky position on their part to give us this model posturing, considering their track record. The first country to have employed nuclear weapons on a mass scale, the first country to have carried on a savage war in Korea first, then in Vietnam, thereafter all through the Middle East, in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, Afghanistan. And those lives that were lost then, and the misery that those people went through in those wars, and that absolutely calibrated savage bombing, all-night bombings that we used to watch during the first Kuwait War and the second Kuwait War and the second Iraq War, those are still very fresh in our minds. So therefore, it ill behoves the United States to morally hector us on the position India has taken. I think there is, though, even in these blurred lines, something that India will have to strongly consider on at least 2 or 3 issues going forward. Number one, that the entire civilized world, and which is the Western world as well as our Quad partners in the East, they've all come together on one platform, and therefore there is some degree of isolation that India possibly has to contend with on that score. And that's a matter of, I think, some concern which I have no doubt that the government is fully mindful of going forward. Secondly, clearly now, the Russia-China axis, with Pakistan being a very minor tail there, but the Russia-China axis now is going to be a formidable axis going forward, with Russia very much a junior partner, very much dependent on China virtually for its existence, because with the kind of savage sanctions that have been imposed, and these sanctions are going to go on for a very long time clearly, they now desperately need China to bail them out financially and economically. And so therefore, China's position in our sphere of the world is going to become infinitely stronger, infinitely more powerful, and therefore we have to now contend with that fact very, very carefully. Thirdly, I think we also have to take into consideration the fact that Prime Minister Modi, who has an excellent equation in relations with most of these countries that we deal with, and Mr. Pardeep Puri was absolutely right when he said that the Prime Minister speaking to many of these countries actually entailed some kind of a ceasefire to ensure that Indians were evacuated. And that's quite unprecedented and extraordinary in these times. So therefore, I think there possibly is some also expectation in some quarters that he would go the extra mile in playing peacemaker in these times, that India's position of strength in terms of our track record of ahimsa, our track record of non-alignment, and all the other qualities that our forefathers have bestowed upon us, that we should play with the Prime Minister's muscular diplomatic posturing that has happened over the last 7-8 years, and with good measure. I'm saying this in a positive way, that he should perhaps play a slightly more proactive role. I mean, now that the major part of the evacuation is over, that even for a ceasefire or even for the hostilities to at least come to some kind of cessation, I think perhaps some more vigorous dialing on his part should be in order. There is, I think for India, everybody has spoken about the problem of, give me 5 minutes more? Or
3 minutes.
5 minutes more? Is that good? Yeah. So the problem of almost 22,000 students coming back to India is, of course, a very, very serious and critical issue. Everybody has spoken about it. We need to seriously reflect on how we are going to burnish our own infrastructure in this country to ensure that our children don't have to go abroad for much cheaper education, because we lack for nothing in this country, and therefore for them to have to seek refuge abroad like in this fashion, and then now to come back and be left virtually mid-water is something that we'll need to very seriously consider. And I have no doubt, and this is a very sizable number, because there is 40,000 which have come back from China earlier due to COVID last year, and now this is 22,000 more coming back from here. So therefore, the possibility of them being adjusted in various other countries, again, a more aggressive and a more forward-looking policy has to be undertaken by the government. There is, I think, a silver lining also. Mr. Puri spoke about oil prices going up. Yes, that's been happening. It's been fluctuating. But the bigger problem also is going to be on edible oils, etc., that we are importers of. But of course, our exports should start looking up, because now wheat, which was the major export, wheat and corn, which was the major export of both Russia and Ukraine, accounting for almost 25% of the world's exports, are drying up, and therefore this is the time for India to really step up a very aggressive export drive to ensure that we gain something from the ashes of this war in terms of our own domestic economy. Mr. Chairman, I expect the government to very proactively, therefore, while all the government is solidly backed by all shades of both public opinion as well as political opinion in our country. So therefore, they are rock solid on that count. They have held their own so far. But I think going forward, everybody expects, under the leadership of the Prime Minister, for the government to be more proactive, both in the resolution of this conflict, as well as in order to be able to, I think, milk this to our advantage, both financially, economically, and in every other way possible, particularly in the geopolitical context of the fact that the Prime Minister could, and the government could, and the MEA could, and we have a very capable External Affairs Minister who's again had a sterling track record in the ministry. So therefore, under their aegis, if some kind of aggressive policy could be undertaken going forward for a cessation of hostilities. I think that is what all shades of opinion in this House would expect from the government. I thank you very much, Chairperson. I just want to add one sentence. Mr. Naveen Patnaik has, of course, done his bit. There were many ODI students abroad, and I think Mr. Puri will bear us out, because many of them have come back under his aegis, the ODI students, and we thank, my Chief Minister has personally thanked him for the effort he's made, and therefore I also would like to say that Mr. Patnaik has done everything he could have to ensure that our ODI children have come back from abroad. Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Chairman.
thank you, Sri Pinaki Misra. Next, Sri Dr. Shashi Tharoor.
Thank you, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think this has been a very rich debate already, and I know it's going to continue.